If you're looking to buy a 3D printer, it is very easy to be overwhelmed with all kinds of different choices and decisions and features and brands. It's a big wide world out there. But even once you find the brand or the price range that you want to buy a printer in, sometimes there's another decision you have to make, which is open versus enclosed printers. Why should you choose one over the other? What's the difference? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And it used to, believe it or not, just like most things in the world, come down to money, unfortunately. In general, open printers are more affordable. They're cheaper. So that's the reason a lot of people buy them. That's the reason if you look at, Bamboo's lineup, I have Bamboo printers, so that's the lineup I'm most familiar with. Their least expensive printers, open printers. Their most expensive printers, enclosed printers. And that's not an accident. I myself did start with open printers back in 2016. They're a great way to learn, and in a lot of cases, you might never need to move beyond that if you don't want to. And the reason they're called open printers is because they're open. There's nothing closing these in. Sometimes they're also referred to as bed slingers because the bed moves back and forth, which we'll talk about that later, but that is also usually part of an open printer. If I push this magic button right here, this camera will switch over to my P2S, which is an enclosed printer. And this basically just looks like a little mini fridge because it has a little door and then it's totally enclosed. Open printers also do a good job of making some more advanced features more accessible at a lower price point. So it's not always just direct comparisons. For example, in the world of Bamboo at the time I'm recording this, you can get the P1S, which is the older version of this printer. It's the exact same size, the exact same physical size. It just has different features and some different components. You can get the printer only without this AMS for $399. This printer over here, the A2L, is $469. So currently, this printer is more expensive than Bamboo's least expensive enclosed printer. But this printer has one big advantage, potentially, over that printer. And if we go over here and I open up the P2S and take out the build plate, and now we kind of compare that to the build plate size of the A2L, that is the difference. If you're someone interested in doing large prints, the A2L obviously has a lot more to offer. And if you want something around this print size in an enclosed printer, at least from Bamboo, you're gonna be spending a minimum of $1,200 to $1,300. So that $469 price tag is now significantly more reasonable for an open printer versus then having to spend $1,200, $1,300 on an enclosed printer if you want to print large. So making higher end features and capabilities a little more accessible can definitely also be an advantage to open printers. And they're also just a little friendlier for people who want to tinker or modify or do that kind of thing, or just learn about 3D printing. In general, speaking of open and closed philosophies, Bamboo's probably not the brand to go with if you really want a mod and tinker thing. That's just not really what they're for. And that's why I bought them, is because I wanted a printer that I didn't have to do any of that stuff with. But if you're someone who does want to do that, having a printer like this where everything is just out in the open and it's also just kind of super simple mechanically, it's a lot easier to, tinker and mod with. And if you just want to learn more about printers, how they work, the different components and stuff, an open printer, everything just right there out in the open. I feel like the learning part is a little easier with an open printer. Enclosed printers, they don't really give you that accessibility. I can open the door, I can take off this top panel, but everything is still, enclosed here, so you have to kind of work within this space. And this is a very simple enclosed printer. If you look at others that have dual nozzles, or even in the case of like my H2C, which has swappable nozzles, the printer can change them on its own. Now that's a whole bunch of different systems and components and, things to manage, maintain, understand, learn about. So they can be a little more difficult to work on just because they are enclosed. And then oftentimes these are the printers that have the more advanced systems. So if you're someone who just wants things that are simple from a mechanical perspective, that's where open printers also really shine. But it's also worth noting that just because you buy an open printer doesn't mean it has to stay that way forever. It's totally possible to buy or make enclosures for them. There are tons of DIY guides for, specific printers or just general things. You can use stuff like IKEA tables and acrylic and all these kind of simple but really brilliant ways of making enclosures for open printers. And manufacturers even sell dedicated enclosures for specific printers. Like the one I had before these was the Prusa Mini. It's a small little open printer, but now you can get it as an option with an enclosure. So even though it's still the same open bed slinging little printer, it now comes with the option of a dedicated enclosure made specifically for it by the manufacturer. But ultimately, what does it matter? Why would you want enclosed versus open? Who really cares? What are the differences? There are definitely advantages and disadvantages to each. A big one, if you're looking at enclosed printers, probably the hottest topic is temperature, because since this is enclosed, that means you have a little more control and a few more options when it comes to the internal temperature. Even a printer like this, the P2S, does not have an active chamber. That means there's not a heater, why did I say it that way? That means there's not a heater in here that is, actively heating it, but it's still generating heat, and so it can still get warm in here. So even though this might not be, the printer to choose if you want to print like ABS most of the time, it can still handle ABS really, really well. Whereas an open printer like this, since the print is just out in the ambient temperature, whatever that is, it could be cold, humid, dry, hot, whatever, that means now it's going to be exposed to that. And so specific materials, especially things like ABS, might not work as well, or typically don't work as well on open printers as they do with enclosed printers. And then other enclosed printers like the X2D that I have and the H2C, they have active chambers. That means they can really dial in and control the temperature in here for the specific material. They have vents and fans and heaters and all this cool stuff. Whereas this, it just has the space that you're in, and that's pretty much it. But even that really does depend on what materials you're using. If you're primarily printing in PLA and PETG, those are very adaptable and very user-friendly materials. And PLA specifically doesn't need high temperatures and kind of even likes a little bit of airflow at a little bit of lower temperatures. So PLA on an open printer can print absolutely wonderfully. Same with PETG. It's if you want to jump into other stuff and start using like ABS or TPU or those kinds of things, that's where enclosed printers kind of become a necessity. And then for me personally, the other biggest advantage to an enclosed printer is the footprint. If you put this on a workbench or a table or whatever, this is the amount of space that it takes up, period. You might have stuff hanging off the back, like I got a poop chute hanging off here. There are a few cables, but as soon as you account for those things, this is as much space as this is ever going to take up, because the bed does not move back and forth, it just moves up and down. This printer, which is already a large printer, also has the bed that moves. So what that means, let me grab my tape measure here. This printer itself is about 20 inches long, but the bed hangs off the front, and so that adds an extra 4.5 inches to the front and an extra 3 inches off the back. So that means this printer, even though it's only got a 20-inch base, really has 27.5 inches of clearance that it needs, on both sides. I guess the front doesn't really matter. It can kind of hang off the surface if you're comfortable with that. But at least behind the printer, you're gonna need several inches of space. And then it also has this cable here, which is a little bit flexible, but you don't want that to get smashed and pinched. And that is another 7 inches off the back of the printer. So that is basically another 12 to 14 inches that's added for clearance space needed fully around the front and back of the printer that you don't need to think about when you're using an enclosed printer, because its footprint stays the same. And the P2S was my very first enclosed printer. I'd always had open printers since I got my first one back in 2016. And as soon as I did get the enclosed printer, for me, that was kind of like the style and the design that I really liked, because it also lends itself, I think in some cases, to better print quality and success. Because I talked about this a little bit in my A2L review, but if your print is being physically moved like this, if it's something low and wide, it doesn't really matter. Like when I printed this, it doesn't really matter that it's moving. It's not really gonna shift very much. But if you have something that's tall and skinny and then that is being wobbled back and forth, now there's more of a chance for it to come loose and separate, or if it gets bumped by a print head or something, it can get knocked off. And I've definitely had more prints fail over the years on open printers than I have in enclosed printers. Because with an enclosed printer, all your bed does is move up or down. It usually does so really, really slowly as each layer is added to the print. So again, it kind of comes down to the types of prints and designs that you're using, but in general, it's a little less stressful for the prints to just be on a very slow elevator versus like a bit of a whiplash roller coaster over here. Although, to be fair, at least with the A2L, when I did some testing with that, because I tried printing lots of tall, skinny things, this has handled them very, very well, which is great. but in the past I've had a lot of issues on open printers with tall, skinny prints. So which is best is still very subjective, and it kind of depends on your workflow preferences, budget, all those things. If I had to tell somebody with, a very open budget, diving into the world of 3D printers, what do you get? Do you get an open printer or an enclosed printer? I would definitely push them towards an enclosed printer, for a lot of quality of life reasons, and the fact that it's easier to print with more materials on enclosed printers. But if you're on a budget, or you're just somebody who likes to tinker, or there are certain features like large print volume that you don't want to spend $1,000 more to get access to, then open printers can definitely make a lot of sense. And if you're interested in a Bambu printer, but you don't know exactly which one to choose, I do have a Bambu buyer's guide. That's a bit of alliteration right there, that hopefully will help you make that decision a little more easily.